We're talking, we're benching is what we're doing. It's volume time, and I'm gonna be benching. My plan is to improve from last session. Lots has been going on behind the scenes. I'm trying to get stronger, and as a result of trying to get stronger, I'm lifting heavier weights, and as I'm lifting heavier weights, things start to slow down, and this is what always happens, because the longer I spend on strength training, the longer I spend away from training other things. What are those other things? You may be asking. Things like hypertrophy and work capacity, higher rep stuff that we don't really develop so much when we're working on low reps and heavy weights. So a lot of people think about strength training is all about lifting heavy and low reps. So we categorize ourselves into two different types of lifters. We've got our bodybuilders and our aesthetics athletes, or we've got our strength athletes like powerlifters and strongmen, or people that just love to lift heavy. And we know that for hypertrophy, it's typically higher rep range. Take that stuff close to failure. And a lot of people say things like, bodybuilders aren't very strong, which I disagree, but that's another topic. And if you want to get strong, you need to be lifting heavy, you need to be lifting lower reps. So people think you need to be on one camp or another. Well, that's not entirely true. Quite often, the strongest athletes in the world understand how to phase their training in separate blocks over the long-term plan. And including bouts or phases of higher rep work allows you to build more muscle, which in turn allows you to turn that bigger muscle into stronger muscle, because the larger the muscle size, the larger the potential for strength gain. And if all you do is work on low reps and high loads, you are neglecting the work that builds the most muscle. Spending too much time away from that causes you to slow down your muscle building progression, and therefore could be the exact reason why you have plateaued in your strength, which happens to me all the time. I often get carried away with strength work and go really, really heavy for too often with such low reps that I start neglecting all of the other stuff. And all of a sudden I reach a screeching halt or a plateau and I stop progressing. And that's some part of my thought process when I'm considering my long-term plans, is phasing in the high rep work. And that's where I've landed on right now. So I got to a point with lifting really, really heavy and everything started hurting. So that's another bad thing when you're always only lifting heavy all the time. It's just painful on your joints after a while. It's not because it's unsafe, especially because I'm 43, that I feel it a little bit more these days. It doesn't mean you can't progress. It just means you see the signs a lot clearer. A result of that, the only work that I could do was lighter loads and higher reps. And that's why I want to talk about this. This is pretty much the phase. Life forced me to go back to the phase that I absolutely needed, which was high rep work, building more muscle. So the last couple of weeks, I started doing sets of 15, and I'm not going to do 15s today. So I did 140 kilograms for 15. And then I thought I was not going to do 15s again. I was going to keep on adding 10 kilograms and doing less reps. So I thought 150 kilograms would probably be, 12 to 14 reps. I ended up getting 15 reps of 150 kilograms. So I thought, well, the logical progression, I'm jumping in 10s, is to go to 160 kilograms. Don't know what the goal is. All I can tell you is the best that I have done on 160 kilograms in years. So since I've turned 40 is 11 reps. So, of course, that means I want to beat 11 reps today. If I've done 150 kilograms for 15 reps, I should be able to get 12 on 160. So that's my thought process. And therefore, that's my goal for today. So let's get into it. I've just warmed up with a whole bunch of dumbbell work, high rep work. And my first set on the barbell is going to be 70 kilograms. And I'm going to take jumps up to 160 kilograms, which will be my first top set. Let's do it. Yes.
Easy.
Yes. Thank you. Oh,
Good one, bro.
we're happy with that.
That's good, huh?
Goodness gracious. All right. So that, you've already done that, is the best I've done is many, many years ago when I was super big and fat, over 110 kilograms. So I weigh about 103 at the moment, and I did 12 repetitions, which is the best I've done since I've been over 40 years old, which is a really nice thing that I'm teaching people about human potential. And when, well, particularly males they reach their strength peak. And a lot of the times I was saying things like, at the age of 38, in my opinion, and that's not just based on myself. I mean, I feel like I was at my strength peak at around that age. But guys like Andrei Milanichev at the time, who was the all-time world record holding powerlifter, and Brian Shaw at the time when he was at his peak, Zydrunas Savickas at the time when he was at his peak, is all around 38 years old. Now, I moved on to get stronger, but to get stronger was a bit of a process, and it was a slower progression from 38 to 40, but I still got stronger, but I had to put on a bunch of weight to do that, which is why I thought, yeah, am I really beyond my peak, or am I peaking later? Or is it just that I'm getting bigger? And the conclusion that I came to is 38 is where you kind of like accelerate up to 38. This is with men. With women, I believe they can keep on going for a little bit longer than men, but that's another topic. So anyhow, now at the age of 43, I kind of backed away from powerlifting. And I was telling myself that I'm no longer a powerlifter, and my training sessions were kind of no goal. I was never working towards a competition. And so my motivation was really, really low. And I'd come into the training sessions and everything felt hard. And I just, I didn't enjoy my training as much. Anyway, only recently, I'd say in the last year or so, I started prioritizing my training again. And now I'm back to a point where I'm not eating as much food. I'm a lighter body weight, and I'm progressing, and now I'm kind of rewiring my thought process with how old are we when we reach our strength peak. And I think it's not 38 anymore. I think we can continue beyond that, but the rules change. The rules change. So of course, as I'm getting older, I don't consider myself old, not yet, but I'm saying I'm older than what I was when I was a competitive powerlifter. And I didn't have to worry as much about things like joint pain, spending longer time on my warm-ups, doing excessive amounts of volume that my body was able to recover from then. So here's how it's changed now. I do spend more time on warm-ups. My joints don't like it when I come in cold and start lifting heavy. It takes longer to get to that point, but I'm still able to get to that point, which is nice. Copious amounts of volume. My body doesn't like it as much, so I've started to reduce the amounts of volume to be able to handle what I believe my work capacity is, and I'm back to progressing again. So there's slight changes that you should make as your body evolves through life, but it doesn't mean you've stopped progressing. Anyway, so my thoughts on that are, women, the rules are different, lucky you, Dinny G. So I think that women get to progress for a lot longer than men. Don't know why. That's just in my experience. That's not based on science. That's purely anecdotal, and lucky girls. But I'm very happy with that, 160 kilograms for 12. What am I gonna do next? I'm gonna take my gains and run. That's what I'm gonna do. That's kind of a rule that I have whenever I hit certain milestones is don't try and back it up. Don't try and do 2 PRs in a row. So it doesn't mean I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna move straight on to my accessory exercises. 43 years old, man. Very nice. Especially considering I was injured last week. Well, for the last few weeks, my shoulders were hurting me and I was like, whatever it is, I have to stop. Anyway, then I came back to the volume and then, better than ever. By 1 rep max, the best I've done is 210 kilograms. Based on that, I think I'm stronger than 210. My goal is 220, and I believe I'm stronger. I think I'm at about 215 now. If I was on a good day and everything was peaked nicely, I think 215, and the goal's 220, so I'm very close. So secondary exercises for today. This is kind of new territory for me because 160 kilograms for 12 reps, that's kind of, PB territory. So I quit while I'm ahead. Whenever I hit a PB or a PR, however you like it, that's the most that I've done at this body weight, for many years. So that's a big milestone for me for now. Whenever I do something like that, quite often I get quite excited and I get a little bit of an adrenaline dump after that. And then when I try and back that up and do another set of it, the dump of adrenaline or the dump of energy, whatever you like to call it, makes me not perform as well in the secondary set. So it's something that I always do with myself and with the people that I work with, is if you hit a massive number, a big milestone or something that makes you excited, I say take your gains and run. So that's what I'm doing, which is why I'm not doing any more bench press work. And what I'm doing instead is a thing that typically I say not to do, which is avoid exercise redundancy, which is if you're doing the first exercise on a flat bench press, go and do a different joint angle that you neglected in that main movement, right? So go and do incline or overhead or something that hits the pecs in a different position. And what I'm doing now is where I guess there's an exception to every rule. So I'm going to be doing flat dumbbell press. Now here's two reasons why it's an exception. One is because I only did one top set, right? So I still want to develop my horizontal push strength, with a lower intensity movement. So it's not really exercise redundancy because I haven't trained that first movement enough. Exercise redundancy is you go horizontal push and then you go and do more flat dumbbell pressing, which is a horizontal push again, and then machine pressing, which is a horizontal push again, and then a push-up, which is a horizontal push again. It's all the same joint angle and range of motion and targeting the muscle in the same way, but just with a different implement, going from barbell to dumbbells. Now, people say, don't do that because the first exercise of the day, you kind of that's where you get the most return on investment. So you're working pretty hard on that first exercise, and usually we do multiple sets to the point where that's enough work on that movement pattern. Now we need to move on. But actually, I've only done one set on that movement pattern, so arguably it's not enough work on that movement pattern. So this is where I am not avoiding exercise redundancy, I'm targeting the movement that needs work. Now here's the next reason why I'm doing this movement pattern, is because my shoulder, the instability in my shoulder don't know exactly what caused the pain. I don't know if it was a strange unrack that put me out of position and it just jolted, but since then it hurt my shoulder. And coming back and doing dumbbell work, the stability or instability of a dumbbell was aggravating my shoulder. So I haven't done dumbbell work for the last couple of weeks, but now my shoulder's feeling great. And I just did a warm-up set of 37.5 kilograms. My work set, I'm going to be working on 50 kilograms today. So I believe I'm in a position where my shoulder's good enough to be doing dumbbell work. So I'm going to gently reintroduce it. Now, here's another thing that I want to talk to you about with hypertrophy work for a strength athlete versus hypertrophy work for a bodybuilder, right? So a lot of people think hypertrophy just means bodybuilding. Not always. So a bodybuilder trains for hypertrophy, strength athlete should train for hypertrophy, but we always need to factor in specificity. For a bodybuilder, they don't need to have any specific performance. They just need to have a specific aesthetic. So they need to develop certain muscles, pecs, deltoids, shoulder, triceps. That's the muscles that are involved in this bench press day. Usually it's pecs. So the way that I'll prescribe a pressing action, so a bench press for a bodybuilder compared to a bench press for a strength athlete in a hypertrophy phase, has slight differences. And I'm going to teach you a little bit about elbow position. So a discussion that I've had a lot with people in my field regarding strength training when I give powerlifting style bench press to rugby players or combat athletes, a lot of people talk about specificity for a push pattern for athletes is never out here. It's kind of like elbow by the side and this is how you'd push. So if you were to push someone in rugby or to fend or to throw a punch, the elbows are in, right? Or let's just say, I hate to use the word, but functionality, functional strength. So let's just say, when would you need the push pattern to be strong in the push pattern from a functional standpoint? Let's just say your car broke down and you need to roll it down the hill. Imagine getting out of the car and pushing the car. So you put it in neutral, take the handbrake off and push it. How are you going to push the car? Are you going to do it wide, like a wide grip bench press? Or, think about the natural push pattern. It's push, right? So look at the angle of my upper arm or my elbows. They're kind of tucked. So a lot of the times when I teach a strength specific press pattern, that's the elbow angle, right? But I've been doing a lot of, observing with bodybuilders at the highest level and watching how they flare their elbows when they do their hypertrophy work for pec development. And a lot of the top level bodybuilders have their elbows flared. So is that good or bad? Well, neither and both. The idea behind flaring the elbows is creating more tension and targeting the pec at the longer length or the greater stretch, which some people talk about. That's the position that produces more hypertrophy, when you target the muscle at its full stretch position. So in my opinion, both of these methods have their merits. From a hypertrophy standpoint, targeting the pecs in the fully stretched position can have some great hypertrophy benefits. To do that, you need to flare your elbows. Now, here's a discussion that I'm having when I'm observing or working towards building strength athletes so they're strong on all angles to reduce risk of injury. What's one of the biggest injuries in a powerlifting competition, especially with the bench press? It's a pec tear. Where does it happen? It happens where the pec's at the greatest stretch, which is usually where the barbell is on the chest. Regardless of where the elbows are, that's why they say tuck the elbows, so it's not as much tension, but it's still, when the bar's on the chest, that's when it's at the greatest stretch. So therefore, what's a great way to strengthen your body to avoid these things? One is work on technique, always. Two, what about strengthening the pecs in the fully lengthened position? So a lot of people resort to things like dumbbell flyers as a great tool for strengthening the pecs in the fully stretched position. And I agree, but it loses the loadability factor, right? So if you've got a 200 plus kilogram bench press, how much can you do with dumbbell flies? Still not much. Like in my opinion, any exercise gets your body strong and it has some carryover, but the loads are not high enough to have a huge carryover to the specific demands of 1 rep max benching. So this is what I'm going to start including more of in my program, and starting with today. So I'm going to be doing a little bit more of a flared position for my dumbbell press so that it positions the pec in a more lengthened or stretched position, which is how bodybuilders do it. So that's what my goal is today. That was surprisingly hard. I can normally do about 20 reps on 50 kilogram dumbbells. Last time I did, probably more, last time I did 60s, I did 15 reps. But that's when I used my neutral grip and bang it. So just then I was definitely more tentative because my shoulder has been a little bit funny. So I didn't want to just bang it out. Additionally, that flared elbow, I can really feel the increased tension or the increased stretch I'm placing on the pec, which I guess kind of tells me that I need it, right? So for that shouldn't feel like a big stretch. It's unfamiliar to me because I've never really, in a long time, I've never really challenged my pecs in that fully lengthened position like that. So it feels like if I was too aggressive and went too heavy and, was more explosive with it, that's how, I could potentially injure my pec. So that's why I'm being a little bit cautious and focusing on the stretch. Now, one good thing about this is I believe my pecs are very, very tight. And the best indication of that is go and have a look at me squat, how I hold the bar so wide. There's a lot of muscles involved in my tight shoulders and why I can't grab the bar a bit closer than that. But pecs are definitely a huge contributor. One of the best ways to stretch a muscle is taking it through its full range of motion under load. So rather than just passively stretching my pecs, doing a bench press like this, I believe is doing a lot of amazing things for me. It's building my strength of the pec in the fully stretched position, which is where it's the weakest and most vulnerable, as well as improving my flexibility in my pecs. So to tune one, that was kind of hard, but easy enough for me to do multiple sets. I'll probably go for 2 more sets of this. I'll do one more set of that. A few little discussions, side discussions, when we're talking about rep ranges, appropriate rep ranges for hypertrophy. There's a lot of discussion about low reps, low volume training camp, saying that it's a waste of time doing high reps because the discussion is it's the last 5 reps of the effective reps, and anything before that is a waste of energy. Therefore, don't do the first 5 reps, choose a load that's heavy enough to only do 5 reps or 6 reps or something with low rep range, and that's the optimal rep range and loads for optimal hypertrophy. So therefore for me, with that technique, what do I think I'd be able to do appropriately for 5 reps? Maybe 65 kilograms, but I'll tell you now, like when I'm at the last 5 reps there, even though I didn't go to complete fail, it's deceiving because I can feel the weight's coming up easy, it's coming up fast, but then on the 10th rep, I feel like it's actually quite challenging, and maybe I've got a rep, I'm sure I've got a rep, maybe 2 more, but probably not. So I'd say it's 1 rep in reserve. It's deceiving because I know it's moving fast, and it feels easy for the first 5. But that's the whole idea of using high reps for hypertrophy, is because we're positioning our body in a non-efficient way. So flaring the elbows like this is not as efficient as tucking the elbows. When you tuck the elbows, I'm positioning the body in a way that I'm spreading the load evenly across my delts, my triceps, and my pecs. When I'm flaring my elbows, it's placing more of the load on the pecs. So when you're doing that, it's a more compromised position, which is why when you're doing exercises where you're attempting to isolate a muscle more, it's weaker, it's less efficient. The more efficient way is to include more muscles, more body parts. The less efficient way, which is how bodybuilders train, their goal is to not be efficient. Efficient is something like a sumo deadlift, where it's an optimal lever to shift the heaviest loads. That's why you can lift more loads in a sumo than a Romanian deadlift. Romanian deadlift is far less efficient, but it's a lot better for muscle hypertrophy. Of the deadlift patterns, sumo deadlift is spreading the weight over too many muscles to say great hypertrophy exercise. Maybe it's a decent general hypertrophy exercise. Which muscle are you building? I don't know. Maybe it's legs, maybe it's hamstrings, maybe it's glutes, maybe it's adductors, maybe it's back. I don't know. It's too general. But bodybuilders don't like general hypertrophy, they like specific hypertrophy, which is why bodybuilders would choose an RDL, where they're targeting like glutes or hamstrings, rather than general body, I don't know, right? So that's the whole idea behind choosing the appropriate rep range for the specific exercise. If you're doing a squat, low bar, wide stance, like a power lifter, you're putting as much of your body and as much of your muscles under that weight as possible, and you're spreading the load evenly. Go for low reps, 1 to 5 reps. Perfect, fantastic. In fact, I like to really keep my squats under kind of 6 rep range and not go beyond that. That's where it's a complex movement and deserves lower reps and high concentration and high loads. But more isolated exercises, choose the appropriate rep range. So I'm going for 10s. I think for hypertrophy for that exercise, the most stimulating rep range for me would probably be minimum of 8 reps, like 8s to 12s. I think that's the sweet spot. So when you're choosing rep ranges for hypertrophy, and people say you need to go heavy, otherwise if you're doing too light, you're wasting, you're reaching the same end destination, which is taking the movement close to fail, which is where most of the muscle growth occurs. But when you're doing higher reps, the first reps are just a waste of energy. I disagree. It puts you in a position to be able to safely perform the set, take the muscle to the appropriate proximity to failure, which is the important part of muscle building, and avoid injury. So I'm gonna do one more set, and then I'll do some back work, and then I'll be done. Okay, that's all of my chest work done. Top set of bench press, 160 for 12. Nice little PB for this stage of my life. And 3 back down sets with my hypertrophy style of flat dumbbell pressing. Now I'm gonna go and do some accessory back work and some arms, pretty boring stuff. But I'm gonna be talking to you guys more about how to build a base for your long-term strength goals, and how building a base means working on other things besides strength. So right now, higher volume, the focus is hypertrophy. And I've actually made an entire video on how to set out your long-term program to maximize your bench press. So I'll put that up in the links around here. So click on that link if you want to know what to watch next. And that's going to take you through how I program to get a good bench press ultimately over the long term, because it is a long-term thing. It takes time to get strong. So go and check that out. In the meantime, I'm going to be giving you guys some more education on how to train for hypertrophy or muscle building as a strength athlete compared to as a bodybuilder, because there are differences, and that's going to be coming up next. So if there's anything else you want me to talk about, pop it in the comments section, but I hope you enjoyed that. Until next time, see you then.